And it was the most standout photocall of the election thus far, Prime Minister Nuzzle's baby lamb shock. Today, following more sheep, perhaps the turn of the Environment Secretary Liz Truss to get in on lamb feeding.
I'm on another farm recreating that photo op with this undeniably cute little fella, but I'll be asking farmers whether they think rural affairs issues are getting the attention they deserve during this election campaign. What do you think?
It is a story that appears to link for the first time 3 locations of an alleged VIP paedophile ring. Richard Kerr was abused as a boy in the 1970s at the notorious Kincora boys' home in Belfast. But the 53-year-old today claims he was also abused by very powerful people, quote, at Elm House Guest House and Dolphin Square in London. He has been revisiting those places, providing a harrowing account of being trafficked from Northern Ireland to England. Despite calls for Kincora to be included in the official child abuse inquiry, the Home Secretary Theresa May has so far ruled it out. Cordelia Lynch has been hearing Mr Kerr's powerful plea for the full truth to finally come out. A warning, some viewers may find this harrowing story upsetting.
My name is Richard Kerr, and I'm 53, and I believe my first time being trafficked to England was on February of 1977.
Richard Kerr has suffered for over 30 years in silence, blocking out the horrors of his past at the hands of what he describes as very powerful people. As a teenager, he was introduced to the world of Westminster. He says he was trafficked from Northern Ireland and that this picture was taken by one of his abusers.
I was used as a boy toy. I was an object, a sexual object.
Rumours of an alleged paedophile ring in the top echelons of society have been circulating for years. But for the first time, Richard's account of what happened to him as a boy links 3 locations. Dolphin Square, a luxury complex popular with MPs and civil servants. Kincora Boys' Home in Belfast, where boys were systematically abused. And Elm Guest House, a former gay brothel where young children are also said to have been molested. We brought Richard back to England from America, along with his counsellor, to revisit his past. His memories were vivid and distressing.
I'm sorry.
A cottage industry of conspiracy theories has built up around this story, but Richard insists a VIP paedophile ring did exist, and it's time for the truth to be told.
They were men who had control and power over others.
They were politicians, you believe?
Some I do.
His story starts in Belfast in the 1970s at the now notorious Kincora Boys' Home. He was placed in care from the age of 5 and sent to Kincora at 14, where he was abused. There he claims he and 2 other boys were hand-picked to be trafficked to London and sexually abused by further men. Both of them, he says, have since taken their own lives.
We were throwaways. That's how I felt. I felt a throwaway. I was exploited.
Richard says in 1977, when he was 15, he was put on a ferry to Liverpool, abused by a man there, then escorted to Manchester and later sent to London. He claims he was picked up in a car at King's Cross Station, taken to a hotel close by and forced to have sex with multiple men.
I had no way to get to England. I had no money. You know, I was under the state care. They were responsible for me. I had no one else to turn to. This is the place that I remember very well, and the memories that I tried to block many, many years ago.
How do you feel about the boy you remember here?
Very emotional. Very painful. Sorry. I'm scared.
He says he's faced years of intimidation and is still being warned not to talk by people he believes are connected to the alleged paedophile ring. Some of his sharpest memories are of the fear he felt when he says he was visited by detectives on 2 separate occasions and told to keep quiet.
They told me to stop talking about Kincora, and that they intimidated me here. There is another place where in Preston, Lancashire, they told me they could put me away.
He claims he was trafficked across the UK, including to Rochdale, Lancaster, Manchester and Wolverhampton. But it's here, at Elm Guesthouse in South London, that he says he faced his most violent experience. It was raided by police in 1982. Newspapers at the time said that at least 3 MPs were questioned. It's claimed the late Sir Cyril Smith was a visitor. It was being used as a gay brothel, and it was alleged children as young as 10 were abused. It's the first time Richard's been back, and the flashbacks come fast.
I was tied up here. I do remember that. I don't know why I was tied up, but I was tied up. With my hands behind my back. I do remember that. Laying down, and they took photographs. Other men were here. Other men came into the room. It just wasn't this one man. There were other men here.
In the 80s, it was reported officers found whips, chains and ropes.
I don't mean to be this way. It happened. You know, I just don't mean to be. It's just holding on to all this sometimes. And I can't believe this happened.
In the 1970s in Piccadilly Circus, Richard said he was picked out from a group of boys sitting upstairs inside the wimpy fast food restaurant.
Would you describe the activity round here as a paedophile ring?
Oh, yeah, there's no question about that. Oh yes, definitely.
Why are you so convinced of that?
Because of the people that I was involved with. And the boys were in groups, even though we were spread across the tables. And the way they set it up, the clients and locations.
One of the locations he claims he was taken to in a taxi was an apartment complex in the heart of Westminster known as Dolphin Square. It is now at the nexus of the Met Police's Operation Midland, which is also looking into alleged murders.
I could have been 16, 15, 17. I remember going in with this guy, and he told me to sit down, relax, and explain about his glasses. And he said he had a Waterford Crystal, and he wanted me to have a brandy, and we had more brandy. And then we had a sexual encounter in here.
Did you ever meet any of the men that have been named to have had alleged contact with young boys?
I just don't want to get into that right now. I really don't. I'm talking to my attorneys, legal.
And why is that? Why don't you want to talk about it yet?
I'm still concerned. There are some people still around, and I'm concerned. Most of these people were very well off, but most of them had positions of power that had influence over others.
Why don't you feel yet, after all these years, that you can name your abusers who were in power?
I'm still in some fear, even though I'm willing to take the courage. I need to know that I can have faith in our government.
And central to achieving that trust, he says, is getting the government to acknowledge what he calls the untold story of Kincora Boys Home, that he claims goes way beyond Northern Ireland. In 1981, 3 senior staff at Kincora were convicted of abusing 11 boys. There's been 2 judge-led inquiries, but allegations of a high-level cover-up continue. Despite claims that abuse in Kincora was connected to England, the Home Secretary, Theresa May, has so far ruled out including it in the official child abuse inquiry.
Right now, when they're not willing to bring Kincora into Westminster, that just tells that the message it sends to me is that there's some kind of cover-up, and there has been.
It's claimed British security services knew about the crimes in Belfast but did nothing to stop them, using the knowledge to blackmail and extract intelligence from influential men. In 1975, as the Troubles were taking hold, a young army intelligence officer called Brian Gemmell was working undercover and tried to blow the whistle. We brought Richard to meet him for the first time.
You must be Richard.
Yes,
I'm Brian, Richard. It's good to meet you. Come on in, let's talk. Come on in.
Brian says he put in an official report about Kincora to a senior MI5 officer, but to his astonishment, he claims he was ordered to stop digging and forget about it.
That's the thing that hits me. That if I'd really pushed the thing through in 75, 76, you could have been rescued. I'm sorry.
Thank you for that. I've been in a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and I have survival guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's a calling. I believe it's a calling,
Yeah.
and I'm not here. This is less selfish of myself. I'm not here to think of me.
Right.
I get peace from that.
Yes. And I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
But it's hard to heal without the truth, and Brian now believes to establish that Kincora must be added to the UK inquiry.
Why do you think it should be?
I think 2 words, Richard Kerr. I think Richard's transporting over to the United Kingdom mainland to be abused, rather than just being abused in Northern Ireland, speaks volumes. It ties the 2 together. Here's a Kincora boy that knows what goes on in Dolphin Square.
Do you think there are still efforts to try and cover up?
I do.
Richard is open about the fact he went on in his adult life in London to be paid for sex with men. It was, he says, the only life he knew. He later emigrated to America.
Would you concede that you became a male prostitute?
I would answer it this way. I didn't become. That's what they made me to be. I had no awareness that I would be that. They shaped me, groomed me, and that's what my life was.
He says he's decided to speak out now for his 2 friends trafficked with him, no longer alive to tell their tales.
It's not about me. It's about the voices that didn't have a voice, and I don't know, my spirit is driving me.
And he has this message for the Home Secretary, Theresa May.
I want those who are responsible brought to justice. Yes, we can't fail in this. We just can't. If we do this now, if we fail on this, we are allowing this to continue. That they can get away from this because people have decided to turn the other way.
The idea those inside the corridors of power were part of a sophisticated UK-wide paedophile ring has been dismissed by some. But Richard is adamant there was one and that he is living proof.
Well, we did ask the Home Office for an interview, but no one was available. They referred us to a statement made last month by the Home Secretary, Theresa May, in which she said child protection was a devolved matter. But the heart of the inquiry in Northern Ireland could liaise with the UK-wide historical abuse inquiry.
So is there any chance the separate inquiries will get to the bottom of this scandal? Joining us now from Manchester are Phil Frampton, who today signed a letter to the Home Secretary about the wider inquiry and is himself an abuse survivor from his time in a Barnardo's home. And from Belfast, Naomi Long, the Alliance Party deputy leader. Naomi Long, you've had these harrowing allegations tonight that what went on at the Kincora boys' home, Dolphin Square, the Elm Guest House, all linked. Do you think that Kincora should be covered by the UK abuse inquiry?
Well, right from the outset, when this was first raised and the CSA inquiry was first being instigated, I argued that Kincora needed to be included in that inquiry. We're dealing here with paedophiles who abused young children irrespective of boundaries, and therefore it is important that the inquiry is a comprehensive one into what happened right across the UK. There are two allegations. First of all, the harrowing ones, which Richard Kerr has just shared with us, about being trafficked to the Elm Guest House and to Dolphin Square. But even before that, there were allegations that the intelligence services were involved in a cover-up which allowed young men to continue to be abused throughout a period when the security services and when the police services were aware that that abuse was ongoing. And I think both of those require an inquiry that comes from Westminster and has the drive of the Home Secretary behind it.
Well, let me turn to Phil Frampton. You've heard allegations there about a cover-up by MI5, and who do you think is being protected here?
Some very, very powerful men. As Richard Kerr says, and Richard Kerr is a very, very brave man, the very, very powerful people are clearly involved in this. That's been said also by the Met police detectives in London. They've also re-echoed that point of view. Personally, I think if we're going to have an inquiry into which is fit for purpose in dealing with these matters, then we have to sweep the top of the stairs first. We have to get at what's happened with the establishment. I'm not sure the current inquiry, as it's now been set up, is really fit for purpose. We need a separate, more short-running, sharp inquiry which reports back in a year to 18 months specifically on the role of MPs, on the role of members of the Houses of Parliament and senior government officials in child abuse and in child abuse cover-ups.
Well, Naomi Long, what could you do to make sure that this inquiry does get to what actually went on here and whether there has been a cover-up?
Well, I have written to Justice Lowell Goddard specifically asking that Kincora will be included within the terms of the inquiry because I believe that is hugely important. There is an inquiry happening here under Sir Tony Hart, but I think the difficulty is that he doesn't have the power to compel witnesses, particularly not witnesses from the intelligence services, MI5, MI6 and so on. So I think it's important not only that they work closely together, but that Justice Goddard is free to follow lines of inquiry wherever they may lead, and if they lead to Northern Ireland and if they lead to Kincora, then I believe that she must have the power and the support of the Home Secretary in being able to follow those leads.
Do you think those leads point to a cover-up still going on?
Well, I think that the longer the Home Secretary resists actually allowing this to be properly investigated, the more it looks like a current cover-up. I see no good reason why Parliament, as of today, would not want to shine a light into these dark issues, would not want to give those who suffered at the hands of paedophiles over a protracted period of time some sense of justice around this. I can see no argument for that other than cover-up. So I think the more it is resisted, the more the issue of cover-up will continue to be live in people's minds.
Phil Frampton?
Yes, I fully agree. There are a lot of conflicts of interest involved in this as far as Parliament, the Home Office and the security forces are concerned. We know that people who've got conflicts of interest, they won't shine that light into the dark corners because they fear seeing themselves and their friends there. And that's what really is the biggest suspicion about this. It's not conspiracy theories now. This is actually being accepted by so many and corroborated by so many different stories up and around the country that it really needs some more serious action than the failing words of a Home Secretary who just doesn't seem to be able to get to grips with establishing a serious inquiry. Or, alternatively, as Michael Mansfield said, perhaps they don't want a serious inquiry.
Well, Phil Frampton, you know, there are those who say that this idea of a cover-up is a conspiracy theory. You mentioned that yourself. How difficult is it for survivors of abuse, such as yourself, to be believed?
Huge. It's part of the cycle of abuse. First of all, to be listened to. Secondly, then, often to be derided about the truth. Sadly now we've got Justice Lovell Goddard saying that survivors cannot be part of the panel on the inquiry because they lack objectivity, which is, again, a form of abuse against survivors. Survivors are allowed to be jurors and judges in child abuse cases, yet for some reason Lovell Goddard throws this prejudice at survivors in relation to the inquiry. I don't know what the New Zealand law justice system is, but this is not a point of law, and that's why we're considering a judicial review on this matter.
Phil Frampton and Naomi Long, thank you very much for joining us.
You.
John.
Now, he won Labour